But we don't do it at church. We grow up. All of us have flaws. If you don't, please come forward because we will worship you. We will adore you. For you are God. But I have flaws, and my goal every Sunday morning is simply to come here to this church and hope that people do not notice the flaws. I'm an imperfect vessel, and I always will be. We don't have a perfect church. We don't have perfect marriages. We don't have perfect staff people. But beneath all those flaws, there is something of great value. We were created in the image of God. So I want to ask you to do something for Christmas. That gives you 5 days to do this. For 5 days, will you promise God, not me, but will you promise God that you will not say anything bad about another person's qualities? Make that a promise to God. For 5 days, I'm going to go without saying anything about anyone else. And the second promise, will you, in the next 5 days, tell someone you appreciate them? I sat down Friday night to read the paper. This has been an extremely difficult week. It is, the weeks before Christmas where we visit all the homebounds and those things, and we had a lot of hospitals, and I was just exhausted with everything else going on in my life, and I sat down and opened the paper to the obituaries, which I never read because I know that people are going to call me but again, God said, look at the obituaries. And there was a picture that I turned and said to Darlene, oh my, Jerome died. And it was too late to go to the funeral home, so I made a commitment right at that moment that I needed to go the next morning, and because Jerome was someone in the hallways at Memorial, an employee, who I just happened to pass almost every time that I went to the hospital. And I couldn't believe that he had died. And I learned that he had had a heart attack because Jerome is, the All-American football player type. He has muscles that I can't even begin to imagine. He is in perfect shape. And I read the obituary and it was almost unbearable. Because it says that he had gone home to be with the Lord. This Sunday school teacher who taught children about Jesus Christ. And in my anger, I turned to my wife and said, why did God take him? Why didn't he take one of these crackheads? Get them off the street. Because the news was on about 2 men who had shot each other that week over drugs or something. And I said, God, why did you have to take one of these guys that is so wonderful and such a great, outstanding Christian? And then I had my answer because I'd already done this sermon. God said, Bill, and when I use that, I don't really, it's not angels speaking to me, it's just the Holy Spirit in my thought process. But God said, Bill, did you ever tell Jerome how much you appreciated his life? I said, no. So I got up the next morning, put on the best suit I had, best everything, tie, my watch, my ring. I selected everything so that when I went to the funeral home, I would stand before Jerome's body with my very best. And on the way to the funeral home, I noticed that the collar, the cuff of my shirt was frayed. And there were a couple of little strings sticking out. And since I spend a lot of time in my truck, I have everything in there. So I just reached in the console and got on a pair of scissors and began to clip, because it was important to me to be at my best, because I wanted to say to this person, I appreciate you. You know, so many times when I go to funeral home, I hear people standing in line saying, you know, Tony was a wonderful guy. He was one of the best workers, had a great attitude. But did you tell him that while he was alive? Have you told your wife how special she is to you? Have you turned to your husband and said, you know, I really appreciate you. You're an outstanding father, and you've been a wonderful soulmate. Have you turned to someone, maybe your Sunday school teacher, or anyone else in the church, and just say, I appreciate what you've done? That's important to friendship. I think maybe the most important word when I think of friendship is affirmation. Adults who have social and psychological and emotional problems, and young people who have these problems, 9 times out of 10, they were never affirmed as children and younger youth. If you will affirm your child, you will more likely guarantee that child a successful life. And if you correct your child, overcorrect your child, you are setting that child up for failure. Such is the importance of affirmation, to say to someone, you know, you are of worth. And that's what God allowed me to do with Tony. But here's the strange thing. Tony affirmed my life. Tony, he made me feel like a man of God. He made me feel like a theologian. He made me feel wonderful inside, because this was a two-way street of affirmation. When Jesus was baptized, according to the Gospel of Mark, reading from the paraphrase, the Message, it says, the moment he came out of the water, Jesus saw the sky split open and God's Spirit, looking like a dove, come down on him, along with the Spirit of voice. You are my Son, chosen and marked by love, pride of my life. What an affirmation. When's the last time you said to your kids, you are the pride of my life? When's the last time you turned to your spouse and said, you are the pride of my life? It's so important that we affirm those that God puts in our presence. I know that this transition is difficult. I know it lends itself to being hijacked and to leading us in the wrong direction. But this is a wonderful opportunity for you to turn to your staff people and affirm them for the jobs that they are doing. There's none of them doing a perfect job. So if you're going to only affirm the perfection, then you have to wait until the Lord returns. But the more you affirm them, the better they will do. The better they do, the more you feel good about affirming, and they become excellent. You see, the key to success is not ability, but it's attitude. We succeed when we have the right attitude. And if you have a positive attitude toward Michael as he directs the music ministry of our church, Michael will more likely succeed and bless this congregation. People who are affirmed are people who succeed. I really thought that God put me there to be a blessing to Tony Falls. But I think it's probably the other way. Tony was a blessing to Bill Owens. I used these points in his memorial service. This week, his father passed away. And I did that service realizing that I was doing it because I had been Ken's son's friend. God gave me the opportunity to comfort this family because I had befriended their son, their dad. When we do what God calls us to do, He makes things work.